Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for giving me the chance to speak. What you guys didn't hear before this recording started is after worship wrapped up, we just had a really good time of just praying and coming together. And I had actually stood up because I was going to pray and sort of transition into sharing. And Tori shared half of what I was hoping to say, and then Blake came in and shared the other half of what I was hoping to say. So it's always cool how God comes together and connects us all for what we're going to hear. So I'm so excited to be sharing. It's been a while since I've spoken. So what I wanted to talk about today is success, and specifically, am I holding myself back, and talk about the true meaning of success. I'm hoping that by the end of our conversation today, we'll be able to look at some examples of successful people and how their quote-unquote success didn't actually feel that successful, and then talk about and understand what are some of the identity lies and identity crises that we kind of find ourselves in as we chase that success, and then finally talk about what is real success and what's left if all that we're chasing, all that success that we're after is not really the thing that we're going after. So we'll go ahead and dive right into it. And as always, starting with the word is important. So today, what we'll hear as kind of the theme throughout what I am sharing this morning is from Psalm 37, verses 3 through 4. And I love the Passion Translation. Blake and Lori had given us the Passion Translation Bibles, and I never used that translation before. And it's just New Testament and then Psalms and Proverbs, but I love what it brings out. That's just a little different enough that it speaks to you in a different way. But this scripture says, "Fix your heart on the promises of God, and you will be secure, feasting on his faithfulness. Make God the utmost delight and pleasure of your life, and he will provide for you what you desire the most." And remember that we're like God, per Genesis 1:27. So when we talk about delighting in God, part of that is delighting in how he made us and delighting in the little goodness inside of us that we can grow and develop into, something that we'll talk about. So we're talking about success and sort of figuring out what is real success. What does that mean? What are we actually after here when we say we want to be successful? And I think a good way to start diving into that is to take some successful people and hear some of their stories of what success, what they expected it to bring, and maybe it didn't bring that. So one of the people I wanted to start with is David Brooks. David Brooks is a New York Times columnist and very sought after for his articles. He's also a very well-established author. He wrote several books, but The Road to Character, he had shared that this book made the New York Times bestsellers list, which is a big deal. Whether you're an author or not, you know the bestseller list is a big deal. And he came out in an article that he shared for New York Times that was 5 cultural lies we believe, or 5 lies culture tells us. Sorry, Mr. Brooks, I'm probably botching that a little bit, but he had shared in that when he got the call that he had made the bestsellers list, that it didn't really do anything for him, that he didn't feel any different. It didn't, that metal belt around his waist feeling didn't really change anything for him, that it all felt very external, and that it didn't really add to or make him feel, I guess, the way he thought he was going to feel, even with an achievement that was like that. And that's a big part of what our society believes success is based on achievement. And then another aspect of success that we hear about so much in our culture is kind of a snippet from Jim Carrey, the well-known comedian and actor. He came out in an interview one time and said, "I hope that everybody could become as wealthy as I have been so that they can see that it's not what they think it is." And I loved hearing that. It was so profound the first time I heard it, because you just think of, oh, when I'm successful, I'm wealthy. Well, once I have wealth, all these things are going to be taken care of. And that's not really the case. And it's nice to hear from people that make it in these areas, that when they come out and say, hey, this didn't do what I thought it was going to do. And then another example I want to share is from Nathan Firestein, aka NF. NF is a rapper, and I am really not a rap fan. When you think of rap, I don't know, it has a bad reputation. But what NF is doing is really, really special. I truly believe that he's doing God's work. He's talking about things like hopelessness, mental health, loneliness, achievement, all of these things that we're kind of talking about this morning. He's talking about these things in such a way that people that are isolated by these types of mental health issues and hopelessness and things like that, they don't feel so alone. So it's really powerful what he's doing. But he has a massive following. Millions of people follow him. If you look on Instagram and you see all the comments, everybody just holds him very highly because of the good work that he does. So he clearly has a sought after status with his popularity and his following. And he's very open about the fact that despite all of that, he still feels very lonely. He still feels like he's not accomplished. So what we learn from these things are that the achievement, the wealth, and the status, they really didn't make the difference that these people hoped or thought that it would make. And NF is actually very open about how when he achieved such a status, that he actually became more depressed because it wasn't what he thought it was going to be. So all of these things that we start to get this idea that the idea of success that we have had up to this point maybe isn't real success. So we're getting a little bit closer, and all of these examples are consistent with what Henry Nouwen, a theologian and author, calls the lies of identity. So these three lies are very consistent with what we just heard. So the first one is, I am what I do. So I am what I achieve. I am what I'm doing at work. I am what I'm doing as a family man, for example. If that was the case, then we would all feel very fulfilled by these things that we're doing, and we're hearing examples that that isn't happening. The second lie is, I am what I have. And as Jim Carrey shared, that if what he has, his wealth, is what he is, then he should be very fulfilled, and that's not the case. And then finally, I am what people say I am. So we pull from NF's example of popularity and being very good. If I am what other people say I am, then why do I not feel it myself? So just to kind of do a pulse check, we've talked about some big things here, and before we proceed, I just want to make sure that we're framing it in the right way. So we talked about that maybe success is not what we think it is, and from that we start to get this idea that maybe we're holding ourselves back from the view of success that we've had up to this point, that entire thing could be faulty. And so if we stop at that position, then we can start to ask the question, okay, if that's not it, if that's behind me, then what am I holding myself back from? What is success? What are we going for? And to get there, I think that we have a little bit more inner conflict to work through first. So I told everybody that I didn't want to look them in the eye for this next part because it could feel very personally attacking, and that's a good thing. We should feel those things. When we feel something that is a lot of truth and our ego feels very angry and inflated, those are really good places for us to press on, because on the other side of that is growth and truth and self-actualization, where we can come into a new potential and start to see different things that we can do with what God has given us. So we've talked about people that have reached statuses of success. They would be considered successful people, yet they've shared that they still don't feel very fulfilled. And so another aspect of success that I want to talk about to help us kind of get to what is real success is to talk about ways that we actually get in our own way of being successful. And so these are some themes that I've noticed in myself and other people. Is the first self-defeating tendency that we tend to have is in self-preservation, which is the idea that I have to protect myself. I have to protect myself from pain. I have to protect myself from failure. And a lot of this one comes down to, I have to protect my reputation. I have to protect what people think of me, what opportunities might come to me as a result of those connections. It's very intelligent. It's good to have self-preservation. But what we don't want is to be hung up on preserving ourselves in such a way that we're never actually going forward. Then there's a fear there that if I don't do this, or if I don't preserve in this way, then I'm going to be held back. When the truth is that the self-preservation in itself can actually stop us from progressing. I think we're really good at protecting ourselves from danger and from pain. Our bodies are designed beautifully and wonderfully that they're just like machines. We can sense when we're in danger. We can sense things that will bring us pain, and we'll stay away from those. But where we're often wrong is in the protection of our reputations and our personalities, and assuming that we have to protect ourselves in order to advance. So I wanted to share a story. There was a person on my team. I lead a team of 18 people where I work. And this person came to me, and they are constantly, it seems, in turmoil, constantly in conflict and complaining, and things just aren't quite right. Yet at the same time, there's a big push for advancement, and I want more. I need more responsibility. I need deeper connections. I need to do more. So it's very conflicting. And something came up with this person where they just finally said, hey, I am overwhelmed. I need something to change. I cannot manage all of this, which is perfectly fine to do. I love when people bring those things to me, because that's how you actually make a change, when you speak up. So I asked this person, what would you like to change? You have two options here. One is we could take off the things that are more transactional, a little less thoughtful, the easier things, or we can take off this other thing that you had asked to be a part of because of your push for advancement, and that was a business improvement project that's a little more difficult, requires a little more creativity, has a little bit more return at the end of it, yet is not super easy. And so this person took several hours to come back to me and let me know what they decided. And they finally came back and they said, can I have both? And the truth is that no, we can't have both. I wish that that was the case. Actually, no, I don't even, I'm going to stop myself right there. I don't even wish that that was the case, because we would never, ever grow. We would never get anywhere if everything was easy for us. We can't have growth at the same time as comfort and convenience. But what I shared with this person is that you may not have both of those things at the same time, but what you will have is you can have comfort as a result, as a fruit of your discomfort, your push, your growth. Because as you push out and you push the fear down of failing, or whatever that fear is, then you can get to a place of comfort with this new level as you do it, as you get into it. And then from there, you'll see yourself as being comfortable in that, because you're going to look to the next thing up that is going to be a challenge for you, and that you'll have to advance yet again and face new fears. And so I'm so glad that this person brought this conversation up, because what came out as a result of the conversation is really the root of what needed to be said. And that was, they said that they were afraid, keyword there, self-preservation, full in flare here. They were afraid that if they didn't see the project through, that they would be viewed as a failure, and that they would be looked at as somebody who couldn't see things through, who couldn't finish, and they would lose that opportunity to do something else, which was entirely not true at all. So in this situation, what would have been the right thing to do is what they finally did, by saying, hey, I'm burned out with this right now. I've been going way too long. I need to do something different. I've got too many things juggling. Because what could happen now as a result is a new person that has that energy, that wants to have a new opportunity, can come in and do a better job. And then this person who let me know that they were burned out, they can go on and do other things, because this was not the only option that they had for advancement and for moving forward and getting new experiences. There were other things that could have been done. But before, and in any situation, before we can have that different chance for advancement, we have to be confrontational with our fears. There cannot be growth and comfort at the same time, and we cannot have growth until we face fears. So that's the first way we get in our own way, is we don't face our fears. We don't speak openly. We don't confront ourselves properly. The second thing is a lack of accountability, which is the belief that success is out of our control. And this is where people really may feel attacked, so brace yourself a little bit. And I'm attacking myself here because if you've ever heard yourself say or other people say things like this, they have a lack of accountability and they believe somewhere along the line that success is out of their control. So when you hear things like, oh, if only I had more time, if only I had more money, if only that hadn't happened to me, if only I'd made better decisions. And it goes on and on and on to the point that we're looking at ourselves from an exterior viewpoint. So of course we're never going to get anywhere because we're always looking at ourselves like a wounded dog with our tails tucked between our legs as victims, really. And speaking of victims, I want to define victim because there's two different ways that victim can be defined. The first way is just somebody that something happens to them. They're involved in an accident, some kind of tragedy. And a lot of us are victims to things. We could be a victim of somebody's poor decisions. We can be a victim of loss. We can be a victim of an accident, a car accident, things like that. And then the other definition of victim is somebody who is duped, tricked, an easy target, if you will. And unfortunately, I think a lot of us have fallen in that second definition because we're duping ourselves into thinking that we are not in control of our own success, because that's not true. And so I think a good way to look at this is to talk about some people that have been that first classic definition of a victim and see what they have done to get themselves away from just being a victim. So one person I wanted to talk about as an example of being a victim, his name's David Francisco, and he was a sort of local musician. I think he's from Nashville, and he was just riding his bike one day and somebody distractedly driving ran him over on his bike and he became paralyzed, I think from the waist down. And so his story could have just stopped right there. He could have just said, oh, I'm a victim. I'm the guy that lost his legs. I'm the guy that got run over, and that's his story. But he wanted more than that, and there was more in him than that, and there was already so much life happening that he could now take this and add to it, or he could let go of all that his life had brought him up to that point and just said, well, I'm just the guy that got ran over. And I'm so glad that he did, because what he did is create this web of just farther and farther reaching out victories for these people. So he released a new album, I think it was a few months ago, and leading up to this album release, he did what he called Lionheart, 30 stories in 30 days. And each day he highlighted somebody's story, and they were by definition victims of something, either birth defects or accidents or abuse or different things like that. All these 30 different kinds of perspectives, one new each day. And so you can imagine how far-reaching that becomes when one person shares it and another person shares it. You gain so much momentum for the people that are needing change, that are needing that encouragement that, yes, I have been a victim of something. They've accepted that. Something happened. But then they took the responsibility to say, but this is my life, and I'm not going to stop as the guy who lost my legs. And now what he's done with that is he's given these people, these other victims, a platform to say, you know what, I'm more than a victim. Success is in my control. I can do something with this. And it's so inspiring. And then another group of people that I wanted to talk about for those that I presented to this morning are actually friends of ours, but their names are Tom and Tiki. And they lost their son several years ago to a drunk driver that was driving down the interstate on the wrong side of the road. It's completely out of their son Kevin's control. And there again, these are two people that could have said, we're the family that lost our son. But there again, there is this opportunity that there is so much more for them than that. And all the things that they had experienced in their life up to that point could not have been for nothing. And when we accept that we are a victim and leave it at that, then we're accepting the defeat of my life has been pointless up to this point. And hello, depression. There's nothing, there's no direction that we can take from that. But when we add responsibility to the acceptance of, yes, I was a victim of this, but I can do something with this, and we can become valuable to other people and to the kingdom of God for sharing truth and encouragement, that's the way that it should be. And that's the way that I think we're really seeking after. So Tom and Tiki didn't just stop at we're the family that lost our son. They created a nonprofit educational organization called 1 in 3, where they share education about drunk driving, the impact that it has. They offer services and support for those that have been impacted, or designated driver programs, and all these different things to support what that mission is. And that mission would not have been had they not said, yes, this happened, I was a victim of this, but there's more. And we have to say that too, and we can change that today. Today we can say, I have been a victim, and accept that, and feel the pain of it, feel the anger from it, whatever comes from that acceptance. And once we accept it, then we can go on and claim responsibility for what we have left and turn it into something. And that's the difference of the definition of something happening to somebody versus somebody who has been tricked, who's been duped. I think a lot of us have been duped into thinking this, and the missing link to the people who have been classic victims, these people that have been involved in accidents and tragedies and trauma, they have said instead, I'm not stopping there. This happened to me, yeah, but I'm going to do something with it. And that is something that we can do today. And then finally, a third self-defeating tendency that we run into, it kind of is in the same vein of a lack of accountability, but it's low self-esteem. And it's the belief that I don't deserve success. And I think a lot of us are drawn to the negative. We tend to look at what we aren't, what we don't have, what we don't know, all of these fears and all of these low places. So of course, when we stand next to a peer and we've been thinking so long, I don't have this, I don't know this, of course we feel small next to other people because we've been dwelling on what we don't have, and as if we even know the truth about what these other people are confident in, or other issues that they have. Comparison is huge here as a baseball bat to our self-esteem. I know for me personally, I always think that I should be more outgoing, and when I'm out in public or at parties, that I'm not as outgoing as I want to be. So I have to battle that idea that I'm a failure because I didn't live up to what I thought I ought to be. And then another example that I deal with is I should have more financial security than I do as a husband and father to will be 3 kids in 2 months. I should have more financial security. But if I accept these places as this is it, I didn't make the right decision up to this point, or whatever the issue is, then that's classic self-defeating, because then I get in my own way and I don't make a financial future for my family with what I have now. If I just stop and throw my hands up and say, I don't have that right now, I'm so low, that we stop ourselves from making what we need to have happen right now. So what we have to do to defeat this low self-esteem issue is focus on the right values. Sure, maybe you're not as outgoing as you think you should. Maybe you're not as good at that sport as you want to be. Maybe you didn't make great decisions. But what you can focus on is your attitude to try now and to make something of it now. And this is how we can start to talk about what real success is. So we talked about the self-defeating tendencies, and the reason I wanted to talk about those things is as we get this idea of what we're getting in our own way of, then we start to get a really clear picture of what success actually is. This is the thing that we're keeping ourselves from. So the first thing that we talked about is in facing fears. And the second thing we had talked about is acceptance and responsibility. And this one's huge and something that I never really viewed as successful. Facing my fears is something that I've always sort of naturally done, but there's been places that I've had to push on that. There's a lot of vulnerability involved in facing your fears. And we don't realize the things that come out of when we face our fears, the talents that we have, the gifts of courage that we have to share with people. It connects with other people, and they think, oh, good, I'm not alone. And all of those things are a result of facing our fears. And then the acceptance and responsibility part. This is something that I've faced my own fear about and been very vulnerable about, is sharing battles with mental health that I've had for almost a year. I've always dealt with anxiety issues, even as a kid. I remember going to school in middle school, and I would throw up in my mouth and have to go to the bathroom, and I'd have to have my twin sister accompany me to class. And I had all these separation anxiety issues that led to different social anxiety issues. And suddenly I just kind of figured out how to work with them. And I always had little flares here and there, but last Thanksgiving I had this spout of intrusive thoughts, and it just like really threw me into this fit of anxiety that to the depths that I've never experienced it before. And I was so afraid, and I just felt so unusual, and I knew that something was off with me. So I sought a therapist, and I found a guy that I felt like was really helpful for me. And I wanted to just take a minute here and share that there is no shame at all if you feel like you need somebody to talk to. If you need some help, you should absolutely seek that. Do whatever it takes to seek that help, because there is success in that alone. When you say, hey, there's more for me than this, this is not the best that I can be, that is true success. And that, as you can tell, has nothing to do with achievement, with wealth, or with your status. That has everything to do with the development of your character. And that's what real success is. But my therapist that I have been visiting, he had said, Kyle, I see you as a success story. And it really threw me for a loop. And that's kind of what generated this entire message. Is he said, no, I do. I see you as you have done a lot of work behind the scenes besides just when you're in my office. And I can tell when you bring that, you're ready to ask questions. You're willing to learn. You're willing to accept a new perspective. And you're willing to accept where you have been and where you are. And that was huge for me to think that that is success by definition, because as I'm sitting in this therapist's small, dark, uncomfortable, air-conditioned office, and I'm talking about weird issues that I don't know how to manage, I don't feel very successful at all. So to hear somebody say that, it really brought a perspective to me that I needed. And then finally, we had talked about low self-esteem, but focusing on the right things, that is successful. And we'll talk about that, what those right things are here in just a minute. So I want to share some quotes. We had heard from some people that achieved success, but shared that it wasn't what they thought that it was, or it didn't bring them what they thought it was going to bring them. So I want to share some quotes from people who had, it seems like, really got the big picture of success. So Winston Churchill, he said, success is not final. Failure is not fatal. It's the courage to continue that counts. And that is a true success story. That's where we face our fears. And facing our fears is how we achieve real success in our character and inside our spirit. And Walt Disney, he said, the way to get started is to quit talking and begin doing. And that's pretty curt, but I think a lot of us need that, especially when we talk about having that lack of accountability and believing that things are out of our control. We just got to get started. Get what you have and let's get to work. Let's stop talking about it. Let's stop yapping. Let's just do it. There's so much truth in that. And then finally, Einstein said, try not to become a man of success, rather become a man of value. And I love that so much, especially for people that are struggling with low self-esteem, that as we focus on the right things, what do we mean by that? It is this. It's becoming people of value to the kingdom of God, sharing his truth, encouraging others with that, of who they are in him and all the gifts that they have that they can bring, and that their life does have a purpose. That is how we become people of value, and that's where we can draw true confidence from. So finally, we can talk about what's left. And this was really, really scary for me, because I turned 30 this week, and I've spent my entire life under the assumption that I am what I do. And so I've chased after career success and achievements and educational milestones and things like that, and I've hit those things. Yet here I was at 29 years old, just dying inside because it didn't meet what I was thinking it was going to meet. So it can feel really, really scary, especially if we've spent our entire lives thinking this direction, that success means this one thing. And if we take this one thing away, well, then my God, who are we? And I was sharing in the message this morning that my grandmother-in-law, she had an accident and she broke her wrist. And she has identified herself so much as a servant. She's an excellent host, excellent. When you go to Mama's house, as I call her, you know you are being served. She's got great food, great desserts. You can tell she's thought through everything, different quirky things that people like or dislike. She is going to meet your need there. She's just an excellent host and a true servant's heart. So when she broke her arm, we had talked about this, that she was a little scared because she's not able to do the things that she's identified with herself as doing. I am what I do. So it's definitely scary, and it's important for everybody listening to realize that as we face something and we hear something new and we come away from this idea that we've had, it is going to be scary. There is no way to go around that. We can't live our life in comfort like we talked about if we want true growth. We have to sit in the discomfort and in the truth of these other ideals in our head breaking and being faulty, and we have to restart. And the reason that those things like, oh, I need to focus on my house and my car, my career, my family, and all these things that we think are going to bring us quote unquote success, the reason they feel so big is because we've spent our whole lives making them into these mountains. We've made them huge. If we think back to how we were as children, those were not the things. I mean, sure, we may have talked about being a firefighter or a police officer or some hero, or, you know, but what we're talking about as children is passion. What we're talking about is our security and those that we love and joy and imagination. Those are the things that we really truly are, and why Jesus says that if, in order for us to experience the kingdom of God, we have to go back to being like a child. We have to go back to that inner heart that is so big. So what I'm sharing with you guys here, what do we have left? It's the fruit of the Spirit. And I wanted to let that sit for a second because that feels so small after talking about all these big life achievements and things, but I wanted to frame it and let you know that it may feel really small because it's something that it really is a small thing, but it can become huge, and it can become that driving factor that the psalm at the beginning talked about that really does drive us and provide for us. This is the thing that God has put inside of us uniquely, individually, that drive us, that give us energy, that give us compassion, that give us passion, that give us truth. So as we come away from these other mountains of thinking achievement and wealth and status are the way to go, as we let those mountains fall and we sit in that discomfort, and then we shift and turn the other direction, and we start to focus on these little mountains, these little fruits in our spirit, they will become the mountain that we need it to be, the mountain that we have sought after for all of our lives. So I want to read this from Galatians 5:19 through 23 to wrap up. It says, "The cravings of the self-life are obvious. Immorality, lustful thoughts, chasing after things instead of God, manipulating others, hatred of those who get in your way, resentment when others are favored, temper tantrums, angry fights, only thinking of yourself, being in love with your own opinions, being envious of the blessings of others, uncontrolled addictions, wild parties, and all other similar behavior. Those who use their freedom for these things will not inherit the kingdom realm of God. But the fruit produced by the Holy Spirit within you is divine love in all its varied expressions. Love, joy that overflows, peace that subdues, patience that endures, kindness in action, a life full of virtue, faith that prevails, gentleness of heart, and strength of spirit." This whole year, as I have gone through this sort of nervous breakdown that started because of my idea of success didn't bring me what I hoped. I had this beautiful wife and these beautiful children and this nice new home and this career that had clear next steps and a lot of praise and acknowledgement. And I just sat with it, and I just realized that I still had a hole, and it was so scary to me because these were the things, man. This was supposed to be what I was after. And so I love to see how consistent the Spirit has been in me about the fruit of the Spirit, that this is the place that as we give it more attention, then we will have more passion. We will be led into the success that God called us into, because I believe He did call us into a life of success. He didn't call us into a life of ease and simplicity and everything being handed to us. He called us into a life of being disciplined and learning. He's the Father, and I've never met a father who didn't teach and help his children through hard times. And so I love seeing this, and I truly believe that we can exercise, all of us can exercise each of these fruits of the Spirit, but I believe that we all have individually a connection with one of these fruits that really is our main driver. And so I would encourage you guys to spend time in this, just spend time praying, spend time just breathing, close your eyes, just be still and talk to God about this. And figure out what is it in your spirit that is dying for you to connect with, dying for you to find out. Thank you guys so much for listening. If you have any questions or want to discuss it anymore, then please contact me in any way. Thank you so much, and God bless.